looking to the campaign of 1960, I think that my handling of the press in that campaign was not as effective as it could have been. I think I'd have to give points to John Kennedy. On this campaign, I found an interesting thing. I do better under tough questioning. Just save me from anybody trying to help me in a press conference. When they come in with one of those patsies, believe me, it's a bad answer. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that the best answer to the handling of the press is not to withdraw, but the answer is, well, come on, fellas, give it to me. Sock it to me and see what I can do in return.
There are those who suggest that you were awed, almost overawed by Jack Kennedy's money, social grace, position.
No, I don't buy that. I think everybody tries to rewrite history in terms of what the book should read. But while I do not have money, and perhaps while I am not blessed with particular social grace, I have a confidence that comes from a different source. I fought my way up all the way. And I don't mean that somebody who didn't have to fight his way can't make it too. But believe me, when you've gone through the fires of having to work your way through school, of having to fight campaigns with no money, of having to do it all on your own, you come out a pretty strong man, and you're not in awe of anybody.
There's been so much talk in recent years of style and of charisma. No one suggests that either you or your opponent, Hubert Humphrey, have a good deal of it. Have you given no thought to this aspect of campaigning and of leading?
Well, when style and charisma connotes the idea of contriving of public relations, I don't buy it at all. As I look back on the history of this country, some of our great leaders would not have been perhaps great television personalities, but they were great presidents because of what they stood for, because of their principle, their courage, their character. Now, I hope to win this election. If I do win this election, I think I will conduct the presidency in a way that I will command the respect of the American people. That may not be the same style of some of my predecessors, but it will enable me to lead. Let me make this one point. Some public men are destined to be loved, and other public men are destined to be disliked. But the most important thing about a public man is not whether he's loved or disliked, but whether he's respected. And I hope to restore respect to the presidency at all levels by my conduct. And as far as the charisma and all the PR tricks and everything else that's supposed to make you look like a matinee idol, forget it. If that's what they want in a president, I'm not the man.
But the name Nixon is anathema to millions of American voters. To them, Richard Nixon is a political opportunist to whom the desired political end is justified just about any political means. Well, how does Richard Nixon, if elected by a majority, go about reconciling the doubts of the skeptics?
I do have, based on a hard political career going back over 22 years, some people in this country who consider me as anathema, as you pointed out. But on the other hand, I believe that I have the kind of leadership qualities that can unite this country and that at least can win the respect, if not the affection, of those who have a very bad picture of Richard Nixon.
Let's go back in time a little to the late 1940s, the early 50s. Did you commit no political excesses on which you look back with regret?
Well, I'm not going to discuss the charges of my critics going back to the late 40s and the early 50s and the 60s for that matter. I have been able to take it, and I respect the right of people to disagree with the kind of campaigns that I have conducted. But I will insist on one point, and I will certainly submit my case to any questioner, including you, on this point. Throughout my political career, I have campaigned only on issues, never on personalities. I believe that every individual who runs for office must submit his entire political career, everything that he's said, everything that he's done, to public scrutiny. And his opponent has a right and a responsibility to attack those policies so that the people can see the choice. I have done that. I've attacked hard, and I have been attacked hard. And I have no apologies to make with regard to having presented the case as well as I could.
And no regrets?
I'm as you know, a pretty good self-critic. You have to be, or otherwise you'll never survive. And certainly I must have made a number of mistakes through the years. But you learn from mistakes. You attempt to become a better man through the years. I think, for example, I'm a much better candidate in 1968 than I was in 1960.
Why?
It isn't because there's a new Nixon. As you well know, my face hasn't changed much. I've lost a little hair and perhaps a little more jolly than I was, although my weight is about the same. But the point is that the times have changed. The situation has changed. The problems are new. The country is new. The world is new. And if I haven't learned over the past 8 years about these new problems, and if I don't have new solutions to those problems, then I'm not worthy to be a candidate.
You were vice president only 6 years after you first went to Washington as a congressman. You were only 39 years old at the time. Did too much happen to you too soon in your political career?
Well, I've often wondered about that. Whether a man who has had only 6 years of experience, of course, mine was a pretty intensive experience. I was a national figure in my first term in Congress, and I was a national figure as a senator. I wouldn't have been selected for vice president had that not been the case. But nevertheless, I was only 39 years of age. And that's a pretty young age to assume the immense responsibilities of the vice presidency, let alone the possibility of becoming president at any time. It might have been better, looking back on my career, if my time had come a little later. But you can't select your time.
You say that you were a national figure early on in your political career, but you made your reputation as a communist fighter. Wasn't that the easy way to do it?
Certainly in this business of what you call communist hunting, there have been charges made that couldn't be substantiated. There have been excesses committed by committees and, incidentally, by the communists, too. But as far as my participation in that case, I think if you read the whole record, it's one that stands up. I think I was fair. I think I was strong. And it resulted, of course, in the conviction of a man who had been engaged in activities involving espionage.
So no regrets on that score either?
On the Hiss Chambers case, none.
Well, you say on the Hiss Chambers case, none. What about your use of the word treason, traitor, in talking about the Democrats?
Mike, you can study my entire political career. You can study every speech that I have made. I have never used the word traitor in referring to Harry Truman, Dean Acheson, any of those who were in government during that period. The term 20 years of treason is one that I, in all of my campaigns during that period, repudiated. I pointed out that the question, which was before the American people, was not one of the loyalty of Harry Truman or Helen Gahagan Douglas or others against whom I was running, but the question of judgment, their judgment as to what the communist conspiracy was up to. I think their judgment was very, very bad on that point. And incidentally, since we've mentioned Harry Truman, he was a courageous president and in some ways will be designated one of our great presidents at that time. But I think his judgment in the handling of the Hiss case was very bad. And I have no apologies for having nailed the administration for what it did and failed to do in that case.
How well do you know Hubert Humphrey?
Quite well. Perhaps better than I knew John Kennedy, and perhaps a little better than I knew Lyndon Johnson. We are somewhat contemporaries. He came to the Senate, as you know, in 1948, 2 years after I came to the Congress.
What manner of man is he?
Personally, a delightful man. It's very hard for anybody to dislike Hubert Humphrey. As far as his principle is concerned, well, I'm discussing that during the course of the campaign. I have very basic disagreement with him on principle, but I think Hubert Humphrey honestly believes that the programs of the Johnson administration, home and abroad, are right. I don't go along with those that say that Hubert Humphrey sublimated his own ideas and put them aside in order to be a good Johnson man. I think he believes in the Johnson programs at home and abroad.
Do you know George Wallace?
I don't know him at all.
Never met him?
No, never met him. Saw him once on television. I've heard a lot of people who've seen him in person, and they say that he's extremely effective as a speaker, in Q&A sessions, etc. And this I do not discount. But in terms of a third-party candidate, I just think this is a two-party country. We've survived many other effective campaigners. Let's go back in a very different time. The two-party system was threatened when Theodore Roosevelt ran. And I think even Wallace's strongest supporters would agree that Theodore Roosevelt had more charisma, shall we call it, than George Wallace. And yet he couldn't break up the two-party system.
Do you feel at all sorry for Lyndon Johnson?
Yes, at this moment I do. But my guess is that history may be kinder to Lyndon Johnson than his contemporaries. I have very strong disagreements with President Johnson's conduct of domestic policy and also of his conduct of many elements of our foreign policy, including the conduct of the war in Vietnam. But on the other hand, I think that President Johnson has been a man who has worked as hard or harder in that office, has given more of himself than perhaps any man who has held that office in the history of our country. I mean, he's just a hard-working president. He eats and lives and breathes politics. And second, I believe that when he made the decision not to run, that he did so because he was convinced that his running would divide the country, that he felt that the only way to make some headway in bringing the peace which he wanted abroad was for him to get out. And I think that once we do bring peace to Vietnam, and we hope make some progress on the peace for the world, that Lyndon Johnson will look better in history than he does right now.